Hey guys, tonight we're heading far, far back, long before iPhones, before pocket watches, even before time had names. You're standing at the edge of the world, or at least, it feels like it, as the stars shimmer over the ancient city of Babylon. The Euphrates River murmurs beside you, a long ribbon of silver in the darkness, whispering secrets only the moon understands. The ground beneath your feet is warm, the dust still holding on to the heat of the day. Somewhere in the distance, a jackal howls, and for a moment, it's just you, the stars, and the steady hush of water. Now don't get too comfortable. Because the truth is, if you had lived back then, you probably wouldn't have made it. You'd forget which god to pray to for sunrise, or step on a noble's shadow at the wrong hour. Time was sacred here. Mysterious. And very, very easy to mess up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, post your location and the local time you're listening. I love seeing where this sleepy little history club is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge beside a merchant caravan, bells jingling on donkeys, as the stars swirl slowly above. There are no clocks, no ticks, no talks. But somehow, everyone around you knows when it's time to walk, to eat, to sleep. How? You start to notice the subtle rhythms. The morning breeze picks up at a certain hour. Birds gather at the river bend just before dusk. Even the camels seem to kneel down at the same time each day, like clockwork without the clock. For the Babylonians, time didn't come from machines, it came from nature. You peer up at the night sky again. Those stars aren't random. They're like ancient LEDs, tracking time across the heavens. There's the big one, shining low on the horizon, that means sunrise is still a few hours away. Beside it, the flickering red star. That's Mars. Or as you'll soon hear it called, Nergal's Eye, god of war, and, apparently, night shifts. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians saw these constellations strictly as timekeepers, or if they believed the stars themselves controlled time. Either way, you're starting to realize this desert isn't silent, it's ticking. As you camp under a palm grove near the river, an elder leans over and hands you a carved stick, your first gnomon. It's not much, just a stick and a shadow. But in the morning, you'll learn how it can divide the day into chunks. This early form of sundial will tell you when the sun is at its peak, and when it's time to avoid the high priest, who gets particularly cranky before his noon figs. While you rest, you overhear travelers murmuring about star priests, guardians of time. They rise while the city sleeps, climb temple steps barefoot, and whisper to the constellations. It's said they can hear time breathe. Which, honestly, is either beautiful or terrifying, depending on how tired you are. Back on your blanket, you shift against the sandy ground. It's surprisingly soft. And as the breeze cools, you notice a nearby fig tree rustle just slightly, a sound that seems to cue the frogs. Then the frogs cue the night birds. And before you know it, the stars above start to shift again. Just like that, the night moves forward. Slowly. Precisely. Patiently. Time, you're beginning to realize, was never invented. It was discovered, hidden in wind patterns, animal calls, and celestial choreography. You just had to learn how to listen. One last thing before your eyes start to close, that merchant next to you. He's got a bizarre habit. Every night, he turns over a bowl full of sand and counts the grains that fall out. He insists it's a time offering to Nana, the moon god. But you suspect he just enjoys counting sand. Either way, it's one of those delightful, slightly weird historical details that make you smile. Or groan. Maybe both. And with the frogs now in full chorus, the moon overhead, and your limbs heavy with travel, the desert night rocks you gently to sleep, even if no one's invented a mattress yet. Morning arrives not with a buzz or chime, but with a glowing horizon and the rustle of woven reed mats. You stir under your blanket, the ground cool now, and the smell of warm bread drifts in from a nearby fire pit. The city of Babylon begins to wake with you, slowly, deliberately, like a beast stretching its limbs. And right on cue, your neighbor's rooster lets out a single, self-important crow. You squint toward the eastern sky, where the sun peeks over the distant ziggurat. That enormous, terraced temple dominates the city like a divine alarm clock, one whose shadow rules over life itself. The priests are already up there, pacing its layers. You hear them muttering, robes rustling, watching as the sun casts its first golden light across the stone. You join them, well, not officially. You climb only part way, pretending to inspect some cracked bricks, but really just watching how they work. They move with a quiet authority, each step timed with the growing shadow of the gnomon planted firmly at the top. One priest murmurs something and scratches a line in the dust, measuring the length of that shadow like it's a sacred pulse. They're using it to track something called a Samma stick, a wooden staff marked with increments. By laying it across the shadow, they can tell which watch of the day they're in. Early morning. Midday. The sacred noon. All of it depends on where that shadow stretches. Historians still argue whether these measurements were truly standardized or if each priest sort of winged it, trusting their instincts over accuracy. But to a city governed by gods, a few minutes off didn't matter. What mattered was the symbolism. Time wasn't for mortals to master, it was a gift or sometimes a warning. Later, you find yourself in the courtyard of a modest home, watching a mother rub date syrup into her son's hair, apparently for shine. She waves you over and points to the wall where a faint shadow from the neighbor's roof aligns with a crack in the plaster. "That's when my husband should be home," she says plainly. No sundial. No clock. Just intuition, repetition, and a really convenient architectural defect. You wander through the marketplace next, now buzzing with voices, animals, and bartering. And just when you're thinking everyone is just guessing what time it is, a crier bellows from a rooftop. He's announcing the transition between what they call first light trade and sunspill market, where prices dip just slightly as the heat climbs. Everyone adjusts. Meat vendors swap in fresh palm fronds. Spice dealers shield their trays. Even the pickpockets, you notice, move to shadier corners. And yet, nobody wears a watch. Back near the temple, you overhear a younger priest grumble to an older one, "We should build a dial in every district." The elder raises an eyebrow. And what? Let the bakers keep their own hours. They both laugh, and you realize, timekeeping was power. If you controlled the hours, you controlled the rituals, the taxes, the very rhythm of the city. You sit on the steps later, chewing on a slice of roasted squash. Across the street, a group of children play a strange game with pebbles and sticks, casting long shadows in the afternoon sun. One kid yells, "You're out." Shadow past the mark. You smile. Even their games use time as a measure. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. There's a growing belief among some scholars that Babylonian children may have been trained in time awareness through play. That's right, ancient daycare with built-in horology lessons. Move over, Montessori. As the sun begins to descend, the shadows creep back, stretching toward the river. You feel it again, that quiet shift, the slow winding down of the day. Everything is in motion, but nothing feels rushed. You run into an old man repairing a fishing net. He nods toward the sky and mutters, "An hour more." You glance up, unsure what he sees, but then notice the position of Venus, glowing faintly. You nod, as if you understood. Maybe one day you will. And just as the sun dips behind the outer wall, the temple bell rings out again, 3 slow, thunderous chimes that ripple across rooftops like waves. Time, once again, is declared. The rooster from this morning crows again, completely off schedule. You both ignore him. The day cools, and with the scent of roasted onions hanging in the dusk air, you follow a quiet procession of scholars into a low mud brick hall lit by oil lamps. You're not here to pray, you're here to scribble. Well, to watch others scribble, really. This is the scribal school, the intellectual engine of Babylon. And tonight's lesson? Time. You crouch beside a young scribe who carefully presses a stylus into a soft clay tablet. The symbols are neat, geometric. He's copying from an older tablet set beside him, its edges worn smooth by generations of hands. The lines aren't just words, they're numbers, calculations, a primitive form of scheduling. You watch as he carves a sequence of symbols, 60, then 10, then something that looks like a fish, but actually means interval. The Babylonians, you're realizing, were obsessed with base 60. 60 minutes, 60 seconds, 6 directions on a hexagon. It's all here, baked into this clay before clocks existed. Your math teacher would be giddy. And here's the kicker, historians still argue whether the Babylonians used base 60 purely for astronomical tracking or if it trickled down into daily life through their obsession with symmetry. Either way, their number system is the grandfather of your microwave's timer. You owe your popcorn button to a guy in a linen kilt with a reed pen. The master scribe walks by, his beard braided and dusted with chalk. He inspects a student's work, grunts, and points to an error. Too much sun, he mutters. You think he's being metaphorical, but no, he's literally noting that the tablet's sun-marked reference doesn't match the actual shadow patterns outside. Someone's going to have to recarve that slab. Time waits for no apprentice. You lean closer and notice another scribe etching what looks like a long calendar, symbols of moons, harvests, days between certain celestial alignments. A time map. Not just hours, but whole seasons carefully tracked through cycles of Venus and Jupiter. You think about your own calendar, covered in birthdays and dentist appointments, and marvel at how far we've come, and how much we owe to these precise, clay-loving overachievers. Then, one of the scribes slides over a fresh tablet and makes a joke about inventing lunch breaks. The others chuckle. Apparently, sarcasm predates daylight savings. Later that night, you wander behind the temple, where tablets are stored like dusty filing cabinets. You trail your fingers across their surfaces, lists of festivals, phases of the moon, even predicted eclipses. The stars weren't just decorations here, they were calculators. You recall hearing earlier that priests could predict eclipses with eerie accuracy. You used to think that was myth. Now, standing here, surrounded by a library of time baked into earth, you're not so sure. A fringe theory floats through your mind. Some scholars believe that Babylonian scribes, while recording astronomical data, may have accidentally recorded sleep cycles. Yep. Insomnia scratched into clay. One damaged tablet even includes the phrase, "The stars did not move," which might have meant the observer simply nodded off. Hey, who hasn't? Your eyes grow heavy again, the room warm from oil lamps and packed bodies. A low hum of recitation flows around you, soothing, hypnotic. The flickering shadows on the wall feel like they're moving in rhythm, tick, tock, even though the only clock is the fire. And just as you start to drift, a scribe near you slaps down a chunk of clay and says, "This one's for the night stars." You smile. That might be the world's first night shift schedule. The next morning, you wake not to a bell or a rooster, but to the low hum of voices outside. A farmer passes by, balancing a basket of barley on his head, and gestures for you to follow. You do, feet brushing soft dust, the air already warming under the early sun. You're heading to the barley fields just beyond the city walls, where time isn't told with stars or shadows but with sprouts, rainfall, and the dance of moons. The field is alive, not just with crops, but with rhythm. Every row of grain sways together, and the farmers hum a slow chant as they work, keeping pace like clock gears made of muscle and song. The old man beside you hands you a curved blade and mutters, 10 rows before the moon sleeps. You squint upward, spotting the thin crescent already fading into the brightening sky. The moon tells you how much time you have left, not to harvest, but to rest. You nod, pretending you understand. But inside, your head spins. They're telling time with plants. Later, you sit beneath a shady tamarisk tree and watch as one of the elders draws in the dirt with a stick. He sketches a circle, marking the positions of the moon across the month. Not just full and new, he marks 8 phases, each tied to farming rituals. Plant on the second sliver. Harvest when the moon is halved. Rest when it's bloated and bright. Historians still argue whether these lunar-based rituals were based on observation or if they were simply religious tradition. Did they notice patterns through trial and error? Or did someone just decide one day, hey, let's only harvest on Wednesdays that aren't Wednesdays? No one's sure. But the grain seems to obey. You learn that farmers even tracked shadows in their fields, not for the time of day, but to measure growth. They believed crops told you what hour it was by how they bent toward the sun. One farmer explains it proudly: if the wheat turns its head left, it's mid-morning. If it looks down, go home. You can't help but smirk. Somewhere in this barley patch, you've just met the first plant-based wristwatch. In the evening, the farmers gather around a stone platform to divide rations. They use a system of measured baskets, poured out to the beat of clapping hands. Everything moves in rhythm. The sound of barley grains cascading into pots is as precise as any ticking second. It's not a schedule, they don't write it down, but it's reliable. Predictable. Repeated with uncanny regularity. A younger farmer shows you a leather cord tied with knots. Each knot represents a task, and the spacing between them signifies time. When this one gets wet from sweat, he jokes, I know it's time to eat. It's primitive, yes, but you begin to realize, timekeeping doesn't require numbers. It only needs consistency. Nearby, a shepherd whistles to his flock as the sun lowers. The sheep bleat in unison, responding as if they too are synced to a celestial clock. And here's your quirky tidbit: some Babylonian communities believed that animals sense the gods' passage through the sky. If your goat lay down at the wrong time, you'd cancel a journey. Or a wedding. Or both. And frankly, who are you to argue with goat logic? As dusk settles, the tamarisk tree casts long shadows across the rows. A chill returns to the air. The elders rise without a word, they know, without checking, that the day is done. The moon hovers above, perfectly placed, like a ghostly thumbprint pressing pause on the land below. And as you walk back to the city, carrying the last of the barley in a woven sling, you feel it again, that gentle tug of time, not as something enforced, but something lived. No alarms. No digits. Just grain, moonlight, and the quiet certainty of when to begin, and when to rest. The city is quieter tonight. As you pass through the massive gates of Babylon, torchlight flickers across clay walls, and the scent of burnt incense mixes with something more pungent, fresh goat droppings, probably. The temples loom ahead, but your attention drifts sideways to a tall bronze bell hanging in a public square. It looks ceremonial at first glance, but a priest walking by strikes it 3 times with a mallet. The sound is deep, measured, and clearly not random. People respond instantly. A merchant packs up his stall. A woman gathers her children. Somewhere, someone mutters, "Last bell before offerings." You've just witnessed a schedule enforced by sound. You trail the priest through the city's winding paths, until you reach the grand ziggurat once more. But instead of heading up the steps, he turns toward a narrow archway and descends into a side chamber. You follow, cautiously. It's darker here, torchlit and musky. Inside, you find a stone chamber where several priests sit cross-legged, whispering over wax tablets and oil-soaked scrolls. A gong echoes outside. One of them nods and chants softly, "Evening gate closed." Another makes a mark on the wax with a stylus. Then he turns to you and grins, "Time is for the gods, but the bells help us humans keep up." What you're seeing is astonishing. A coordinated system of sound signals tied to daily rituals. Every bell ring, its number, tone, and spacing, signals something. Worship. Work. Rest. Even crime. One long note at dusk. Market ends. Two sharp chimes at sunrise. Animal sacrifice begins. Miss one, and you're either hungry or arrested. Historians still argue whether these sound schedules were centralized by the temple elite or decentralized across districts. Either way, the effect is clear: Babylon had a sound-based city clock. Not mechanical, but mnemonic, every ear trained to listen. As you leave the chamber, you hear a different tone, a smaller bell, chiming from across the river. That one's for the fishermen, a boy explains. They row out just before the moon rises. You pause. This isn't just coordination. It's orchestration. Babylon isn't just a city, it's a living song, playing in time. The next morning, you wake to the same bell. But now, it feels different. You anticipate the sound, like an alarm you've somehow internalized. You wonder how many citizens back then developed their own internal timekeepers, not from clocks, but from habit and harmony. You wander toward the temple again, but this time, a priest invites you up. The stone stairs are steep, sun-baked, and slightly terrifying. You climb in silence, listening to your own breath, a rhythm of its own. At the top, the view is staggering. Babylon sprawls below like a living board game. Bells echo faintly, drifting upward with the heat. And there, in the center of the upper platform, is something you didn't expect: a massive metal bowl, filled with water, with a tiny hole at the bottom. A stream of droplets falls into a second bowl below. Plink. 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 You're looking at our night clock, the priest says proudly. It tells us how long a prayer lasts. This is your first encounter with a clepsydra, a water clock. The Babylonians used it not just for rituals, but for fairness. At night, when shadows can't be used, this simple tool marked time silently and precisely. Court cases. Oaths. Night patrols. All managed by dripping water and clay bowls. There's a fringe theory you find charming. Some researchers believe that elaborate clepsydras were used to measure speeches during debates. If you spoke too long, your water ran out, and your argument was literally drained. A soggy mic drop. You reach out and touch the rim of the upper bowl. It's smooth, worn down by centuries of use. You wonder how many people stood exactly where you are, nervously watching their time drip away, praying the bowl would slow. As night falls again, and the last bell rings, you realize something: the sound, the water, the moon, all these weren't tools to control time. They were ways to belong to it. The city didn't obey time. It sang with it. You stay awake longer than usual tonight, curious. Beneath the stars, Babylon changes. The crowded streets fall silent. Torches flicker lower. The air cools and carries the faint sound of sandals dragging over stone. A man in a bronze chestplate passes by, lantern in one hand, spear in the other. He's not a soldier, he's a night watchman. You follow at a distance. He hums to himself, stopping at regular intervals to look up at the sky. Occasionally, he glances down at a clay tag hanging from his belt. It's engraved with constellations, his star chart. The city's clock, at night, lives in the heavens. He pauses and points. That one, see how Enlil's eye is above the Ishtar gate? Means the third night watch has started. I should be 2 blocks over. Then he's gone, lost in the alleys. You stand alone, blinking up at a sky so full of stars, it almost feels overwhelming. These guards, you realize, don't carry sand timers or water bowls. They read the sky like a book. Historians still debate whether all night watchmen were trained astronomers or simply memorized a few key stars. But even the simplest knew how to orient by them. Orion's belt, though they didn't call it that, wasn't a constellation, it was a curfew. When it hovered above the western temple, gates were locked. You walk on, passing sleeping dogs and quiet windows. Then, from above, a deep, three-note hum echoes between buildings. You freeze. It's not a bell. It's a drum. Low, slow, deliberate. Somewhere, someone is striking it with ritual care. You move toward the sound and discover a boy no older than 12 beating a pair of large frame drums, one high-pitched and one thunderous. He alternates them slowly. A woman nearby whispers, "Temple call. 4th hour. Time to wake the moon." You pretend to know what that means, but it's surprisingly soothing. The beat continues, like a lullaby for a sleepless city. Babylon didn't need mechanical alarms. It had rhythm. Drums, you learn, were more than musical. They signaled dawn, warned of flood tides, even marked time for healers mixing herbal pastes. 7 beats, stir. 4 beats, pour, one apothecary tells you. And now you'll never look at a mortar and pestle the same way again. You sit down beside an old wall and let the drumbeats lull you. In the distance, another set responds, off-key and slightly delayed. "That's the outer village," someone mutters. Always a beat behind. You smile. Babylonian time wasn't exact. It was elastic, human, a little sleepy, kind of like you. And then, a fringe story reaches your ears. It said that some lovers used these nightly drumbeats to plan secret meetings. One rhythm meant, "I'm on my way." Another meant, "Not tonight." You imagine some poor soul misreading the code and showing up in the wrong alley, only to meet a guard and a goat instead. Ah, romance. The stars shift again. The air grows cooler. Somewhere behind you, a guard yawns. You realize, night didn't just happen in Babylon. It was managed, watched, timed. Not for precision, but for safety, for prayer, for dreams. And as your eyes drift skyward one last time, you catch the moment when Sirius appears over the eastern roofs. The drummer slows, the beat fading like footsteps down a hallway. A new hour begins, quietly, reverently. Time passes gently here. Even the stars seem to whisper, "Not yet. Sleep a little longer." By the time the sun peaks above the garden walls, you're already up, drawn by the aroma of bread baking in dome-shaped ovens and the gentle clatter of morning routines. But not everyone is rising just yet. Across the courtyard, a man still leans against a pillar, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He's dressed simply, with a curved dagger at his waist and a faint smear of ash on his forehead. He's part of the city's gate watch, the team that guards Babylon's entry points through the night and into dawn. You join him as he stands and stretches, wincing slightly. "Missed the star shift," he mutters, then frowns toward the horizon. "Had to guess by the rooster." He doesn't sound pleased. Roosters, you've come to understand, are a deeply unreliable but ever-present part of Babylon's timekeeping system. Loud, aggressive, and blessed with some kind of internal celestial alarm, they were among the first biological alarms, whether you liked it or not. The man grumbles, "Mine crows too early." Wife says it's cursed. Or French. You're not sure that last part makes sense, but you laugh anyway. As he walks off, you trail behind toward the nearest city gate, a massive structure with twin towers and carved brick reliefs. Here, timing matters. The gate opens and closes at fixed intervals based not on a mechanical clock, but on light cues and, believe it or not, the sound of river birds. When a certain kind of heron makes its dawn call, the gate begins to swing open. That's the signal. Some scholars suggest this system was formalized, with guards trained to listen for specific bird calls before sounding a horn to start the day. Others think it's just a beautiful myth, like most things involving birds and bureaucracy. But you prefer to believe it. After all, nature doesn't hit snooze. Nearby, a man in fine linen lights incense at a small roadside altar. He mutters to a statue of Nabu, god of wisdom and writing. "Help me keep my meetings today," he says. You raise an eyebrow. Even in ancient Babylon, people were running late. You duck into a small bakery next. Inside, the baker's assistant rolls dough with one hand and points at the floor with the other. There's a crack in the stone. When the sun touches that line, he says, flip the flatbread. You stare. It's a built-in kitchen timer. Who needs an egg timer when your building is the timer? You settle on a bench outside and watch the city bloom with movement. Delivery boys sprint past with baskets of figs. Water sellers balance clay jugs like acrobats. All of them seem to know exactly how long they have before their next task. But there's no shouting, no ticking, no frantic glances at watches. Just intuition and memory. You begin to suspect that everyone here is operating on a sort of collective circadian rhythm, reinforced by the world around them. The sun tells them when to rise, the shadows tell them when to rest, the smells of cooking tell them it's midday. And if all else fails, there's always that blasted rooster. One merchant strolls by and mutters, "Woke up late. Rooster had a sore throat." You don't ask for details. Here's a curious little fringe theory. Some Babylonian households may have intentionally placed roosters in strategic locations to reset their household schedule. A kind of domesticated alarm clock. There are even depictions of roosters carved near doorways, possibly a symbol of reliable timekeeping, or just a very early form of passive-aggressive interior design. By mid-morning, you pass a school courtyard where children are reciting hymns. The teacher claps once between lines, an ancient metronome. One child falls behind the rhythm, and a fellow student gently nudges her forward. You smile. Even the smallest citizens of Babylon are learning how to move in time. The rooster crows again. Loudly. Late. A groan echoes from 3 windows. And you? You sit back, watching the sun move slowly across a tiled wall, casting a creeping shadow line you now instinctively measure without even thinking. You're not wearing a watch. You don't need one anymore. Midday presses down like a hot stone. You wander toward the bustling heart of Babylon, the great marketplace, where the city's pulse is loudest. Everything moves faster here. Voices rise in layered shouts. Traders gesture wildly over baskets of spices. A young boy balances 3 loaves of bread while dodging a donkey with 2 left hooves. Time, you realize, is not just passing here, it's competitive. At the market's entrance, you spot a sign, a flat, sun-bleached slab with nothing but faint etchings across it. At first, it looks decorative. But a woman selling pottery notices your puzzled look. "That's the rate slab," she says. Shadow hits the 3rd line, price of figs drops. 4th line, you bargain. 5th line, go home. You blink. The marketplace has a built-in discount clock. She explains, in this corner of the city, market prices shift with the sun. Not hourly, but shadow ly. The stall owners don't yell out the time, they watch it. Merchants adjust prices, not by feeling, but by sun-aligned etchings drawn into their stands, baskets, even the sleeves of their robes. You grab a warm fig and chew slowly, watching a fruit vendor subtly nudge his stall closer to the sundial's sweet spot. "He's cheating," someone whispers. That's second shadow pricing, and it's still first shadow. Babylonian capitalism, it seems, was already alive and well. Historians still debate whether these pricing rhythms were standardized across the city or merely localized to clusters of vendors who agreed to follow the same shadow law. Either way, the result is consistent. Time here means money, and quite literally, location on the sundial meant inflation or savings. You stroll deeper into the bazaar and hear a bell clink softly from a goat's collar. A woman selling perfume winces. Midday bell. Time to close my tent. You look up, expecting to see a priest or temple runner, but there's nothing. Just a faint breeze and a whisper of wind chimes dancing above a doorway. Turns out, not all timekeeping here is formal. Some is musical. Wind chimes are placed with careful intention, Some catch a certain breeze only in the heat of midday. Others are tuned to hum when the sun angles over rooftops. To Babylonian ears, those sounds are not accidents, they're cues. Warnings. Reminders to shift your day before the sun cooks it. You stop by a row of scribes seated in front of reed mats. They're transcribing contracts, land agreements, temple tithes, all to the rhythm of routine. One scribe sighs and says, "If I don't finish by the fifth shade, my client leaves." And takes his goat. Time, again, as accountability. Here's a delightful tidbit: there's evidence some scribes used the wear patterns of their styluses to estimate session length. When the tip began to dull. Time's up. Stylus breaks. Overtime charge. A man selling oils hands you a vial. "It's frankincense," he says. "Stronger before the sixth heat. Take it now or come back tomorrow." You ask why the time matters. He shrugs. Smell changes after the day turns. Not scientific, but strangely convincing. Toward the far edge of the market, under a canopy of palm fronds, a group of musicians gathers with lyres and flutes. They begin to play, not for coin, but because, as one of them puts it, the sun is slanting. That's song time. The music is slow, winding, improvised. But after a while, you notice a pattern. A three-note theme repeats every 7 minutes or so, and each time, someone nearby adjusts their goods or steps out of the sun. This isn't background music. It's a sonic hourglass. Some fringe scholars believe early Babylonian musicians were employed not only for festivals but as live, time markers. Rather than ringing bells or shouting proclamations, they'd play songs tied to rituals, trade windows, or rest periods. You suddenly picture an ancient saxophone solo at your office break. Not bad. As you leave the market, your feet aching and ears full, you pass one final scene: a child crouching near a sunlit wall, slowly moving a piece of charcoal across the stone as the shadow creeps. He's not playing. He's learning. Learning how time moves, slowly and silently, across everything it touches. And in this market, where gold, goats, and gossip all depend on the sun's angle, you understand that time isn't hidden in the sky. It's walking among the stalls, slipping into baskets, haggling for figs. Later that day, you find yourself in the garden of a wealthy estate, pomegranate trees, soft fountains, and marble benches glistening under the afternoon sun. But what catches your eye isn't the architecture or the lush vines. It's a low, circular stone placed carefully in the middle of the lawn. Carved lines radiate outward from a central point, like spokes on a wheel. A man in a pristine linen robe notices your curiosity and gestures you over. "Sundial," he says, a bit too proudly. "Imported from Separ. Very fashionable." You kneel beside it and run your fingers over the etched grooves. It's elegant, far more ornate than the gnomons you saw earlier. This one doesn't just divide the day, it names it. Tiny inscriptions beside each shadow line read things like, "Prayer of Ishtar," "Lunch for Nobles," and, amusingly, "Polish sandals." The man paces as he speaks. Time is for the commoners. Style is for the elite. He's not joking. To own a sundial wasn't just practical, it was a status symbol. The more precise the shadow, the more precise your life. And presumably, the more you could boast about it at dinner. Historians still argue whether sundials like this were truly accurate across seasons, or if they functioned more as ceremonial props, suggesting time, rather than enforcing it. After all, a rich man's hour could last a little longer, couldn't it? Inside the estate, you find more surprises. Painted tiles along the hallway show sun positions during solstices. One servant mentions that the master of the house fasts only when the sun hits the third roof beam on the northern courtyard. You glance up. Yep, even his religion has a designer timepiece. Down another corridor, you discover something peculiar, a room with a slanted ceiling and a tiny round window placed high above. A single beam of sunlight moves across the floor over the course of the day, landing finally on a golden cup placed on a pedestal. When the light touches the wine, a servant explains, "We dine." Even meal times here are choreographed by sunlight. No need for servants to call dinner, just watch the beam. You chuckle, thinking of your own kitchen back home, where dinner's signaled by a microwave ding and a cat screaming at the fridge. Babylon, clearly, had better lighting. Then, a small girl runs into the room holding a polished mirror. She catches the sunlight and redirects it toward the ceiling beam. Her father frowns. No cheating. She grins anyway. You like her. A fringe anecdote you overhear suggests some upper-class households train their servants to memorize sun positions for hosting etiquette. When the sun hits the eastern wall, serve figs. If it hits the basin, prepare wine. Time was not just for clocks, it was for theater. Your day became a performance, and the sun was the director. Back in the garden, a scholar rests under a pergola with scrolls and an astrolabe. He claims to be testing a theory, that certain flowers bloom exactly at the same hour each day. The daisy opens at the second line. If not, it's cursed. You try not to laugh. But hey, flower clocks might be more accurate than some people you know. He offers you a scroll, an ephemeris, charting star and sun positions for the week. It's beautiful. Hand-painted stars twirl in neat arcs, annotated with cryptic lines like, "The hour of winds shall pass before the evening figure." You think, this isn't a schedule. It's poetry disguised as timekeeping. As you rise to leave, the sun dips just low enough to cast long, elegant shadows across the lawn. The sundial's center spike now points directly to the word reflection. The man sighs and says, "That's when I walk alone." And off he goes, barefoot through his orchard, like some ancient philosopher on a schedule of self-improvement. In Babylon, time wasn't always strict. Sometimes it was graceful, stylish, even indulgent. It didn't just tell you when. It told you how. You wake the next morning to the scent of freshly pounded herbs and the low, rhythmic tapping of a pestle against stone. Following the sound, you find yourself outside a modest home in a quieter quarter of the city. A healer, an older woman with sun-leathered skin and a necklace of small carved bones, grinds a paste of garlic, honey, and crushed figs. She doesn't look up. 9 beats, she mutters, still stirring. Then the salve is ready. You sit cross-legged beside her, watching. She counts softly under her breath, not seconds but beats, in a tempo that feels just slow enough to lull you back to sleep. Too early, and it burns, she says. Too late, and it spoils. Time is in the elbow, not in the sky. She finishes and taps the rim of the bowl 3 times, another signal. A younger assistant hurries in with bandages and a small water jug. No one checks a sundial. They know. Healing, like much else in Babylon, follows a rhythm memorized in bone. Historians still debate how formal medical timekeeping was in ancient Babylon. Some claim it was ritualistic, based on incantations that took a set time to recite. Others suggest it was observational, passed down through careful repetition. But either way, you see it here, treatment linked to timing. Inside, a patient reclines under an open window while a string of beads swings slowly beside his cot. You watch the shadow move across the floor, creeping toward a notch in the wall. When the shadow touches the clay mark, the assistant says, "We give him the potion." No alarm, no bell, just sunlight and a scratch in the mud brick. Later, you're invited to the healing temple, where things get far more elaborate. The priests here wear robes dyed deep indigo and speak in murmured phrases that somehow feel like time spells. In one chamber, water drips through narrow reeds into ceramic bowls, plunk, 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 while a priest chants in cadence. It's mesmerizing. You ask how long the chant lasts. The priest smiles, 3 reeds full. Not hours. Not minutes. Just reeds. Then comes something stranger still. In a corner of the temple, you see what looks like a stone slab with a spiral etched into it. A priest slowly traces the spiral with his finger while another strikes a gong every few rotations. The spiral, he explains, represents the passage of divine attention, and when it's complete, the gods are said to have heard your plea. It's not clear if this was purely symbolic or actually a timekeeping method. But you feel it working on you. The slow tracing, the gentle gong, it slows your heart. Calms your thoughts. Makes the seconds melt into something softer. Outside, in the temple garden, plants bloom in staggered clusters. You're told they're arranged by their sun timing. Those that bloom first are placed near the gate, while late bloomers sit in the inner courtyards. The priests call it a living clock. You sit on a bench shaded by grapevines and watch as acolytes kneel for prayers in intervals. No one counts aloud. One woman opens her palms when the wind changes direction. Another begins a chant the moment the temple cat curls around her feet. Coincidence? Maybe. But the rhythm is there. Here's a curious tidbit. It's said that in some Babylonian healing rituals, timekeeping was partly managed by the sound of boiling. Certain mixtures were heated over flame, and their bubbling was timed by ear. 3 bubbles, then pour. Today, you might call that cooking blind. They called it faith. And then, a moment of unexpected tenderness. An old man is led into the garden, eyes milky with age. He sits, palms upturned. A healer places a small sundial in his lap and gently moves his fingers over the carvings. Feel the hours, she says. Let them rest in your hands. He smiles. You sit quietly for a while, watching sunlight filter through the vines, and realize something simple. In Babylon, time was not a pressure. It was a companion. Something to walk with, to serve, and sometimes to let go of entirely. You close your eyes, just for a second. Somewhere behind you, the pestle taps the bowl again. You awaken in late afternoon light, long shadows stretching across the street like fingers reaching for the past. Babylon is slower now. The market noise has faded, the heat has softened, and the city takes on a thoughtful hum. You wander back toward the temples, where the sacred and the bureaucratic often blur together, and find yourself drawn to a stone platform surrounded by clay benches. A trial is beginning. You don't expect a court session to feel like a performance, but here it is, witnesses lined up, scribes tapping styluses, and the judge seated under a canopy, flanked by guards and large urns of water. A man with nervous eyes stands in the center, shifting from foot to foot. Time, it seems, is about to determine his fate. Beside the judge is a clepsydra, a tall, decorated water clock with a thin stream dripping steadily into a measuring basin. Every drop counts. And when the bowl fills to a line etched with a crude drawing of a lion's paw, the defendant must stop talking. You've never seen justice tick in such a literal way. The judge speaks. The man may answer until the basin is full. The defendant pleads quickly, stumbling over words, glancing nervously at the dripping water. When the line is reached, a scribe holds up his palm. Silence. Testimony over. You feel your own heart race slightly. The timing isn't just procedural, it's emotional. Every second speaks. Every drip tightens the room. Historians still argue whether this method was widespread or ceremonial, used only in high-profile trials or religious disputes. But clay tablets suggest it wasn't uncommon. Time wasn't just a backdrop to justice. It was justice. Miss your mark, and you might miss your chance to be heard. The next witness approaches, a woman who speaks slowly, deliberately. Too slowly. The judge gestures impatiently, and the scribe stirs the water to speed the process. A subtle way of saying, time is not yours to waste. Outside the court, a group of petitioners waits under the fig trees. They're watching the sun move across a wall marked with shallow notches. When the shadow hits the 4th mark, the next case begins. Until then, they whisper nervously, adjusting robes, sharing water, and glancing toward the sky. A boy runs past, holding a small wooden box that rattles with beads. You learn it's a time teller of sorts. Shake it every time you pass the city's 4 main gates. If it sounds the same, you're on schedule. If not, you're late. Primitive? Sure. But also kind of genius. Nearby, a priest officiates a legal vow, watched by a small crowd. The couple being wed stands solemnly as a water bowl is overturned beside them. As surely as water cannot return to the bowl, he says, so cannot your words be taken back. A legal metaphor and a visual timer. These people didn't just feel time, they illustrated it. You pass a scribe later who's copying laws onto a fresh tablet. He uses a gnomon stuck into a window ledge to make sure the shadow doesn't pass too far. If it does, he knows it's time to switch scribes. Eyes dull in the 6th shadow, he says. We change hands or risk error. There's even a tale told among the apprentices here, of a scribe who ignored the midday switch, kept writing past his shift, and reversed 2 names in a land record. It took 3 years and 1 border skirmish to correct. The lesson? Respect the hour, or it might rewrite history. You reach a quiet courtyard near the archives. Stone shelves hold thousands of clay records, deeds, rulings, treaties. Each one stamped with a time symbol, a sun, a star, a crescent, or sometimes a combination. Dates weren't always written with numbers. Sometimes they were marked by what was visible in the sky when it happened. It's a beautiful thought, that someone might look back on a verdict and remember, not just the outcome, but that Venus was rising, or the moon was a sliver above the temple spire. As the court recesses, the judge dips his hands in the clepsydra's basin and nods toward the temple. Evening shadow approaches, he says. Time for prayers. And perhaps, for rest. You trail the judge and the crowd as they flow toward the temple precinct, that ancient heart of Babylon where time is no longer just counted, it is consecrated. The fading sun paints the ziggurat in gold and shadow. The top terrace is already lit with flickering torches, signaling the beginning of the evening rites. As you climb the lower steps, you're drawn toward a smaller structure adjacent to the temple, a domed observatory, its walls etched with star patterns and long sequences of symbols. Inside, a priest astronomer, hunched over a clay tablet, peers through a narrow slit in the wall aligned with the western sky. You whisper a question, what are you looking for? Without turning, he replies, Venus. She'll blink before night falls. Then the hour begins. You wait silently. A hush falls over the chamber. And then, like a needle threading through dusk, a pale light winks into view. Now, the priest murmurs. Another scribes it down. A third rings a copper chime, delicate, soft, but definitive. The transition to evening is now official. Here, time is celestial law. Not abstract, but visible, shimmering, anchored in the stars. You sit cross-legged, overwhelmed, as they begin calculating tomorrow's schedule, not in numbers, but in relationships. When Jupiter touches the southern ridge, call the market. When the Pleiades vanish, start the morning rite. Historians continue to argue over how much of Babylonian astronomy was scientific versus symbolic. Were they tracking planetary motion for calendar precision, or were they divining fate from sky patterns? The answer, as always, is probably both. Nearby, a priest points at a stone circle embedded in the floor, its outer ring engraved with zodiacal symbols. It's not a clock, it's a cosmogram, marking where each celestial body should appear over the course of the month. You place your hand on it and feel the indentations, cool, smoothed by centuries. The priest smiles. Even the gods need schedules. You wander into the adjoining hall where a young apprentice reads aloud from a scroll. The text is melodic, dreamlike. In the third rising of the bull, when the moon is high but not full, begin the ceremony of opening gates. Every phrase is tied to a time, but a cosmic time, not a rigid slot on a modern clock. There's a fringe belief among modern scholars that these readings were early, hour stories, ritualistic narratives told to pass time as the stars shifted. Some even suggest that Babylon's bedtime tales were linked to planetary alignments, an early form of sleep syncing. You find that oddly comforting. Further inside, you're shown a room with a painted ceiling, a full night sky rendered in indigo and silver, with tiny gemstones marking major stars. A flickering oil lamp hangs in the center, casting shadows that slowly rotate across the ceiling as it swings. A priest explains, when the shadow of the lamp touches Scorpio's tail, it's time to close the temple gate. No bell. Just light and shadow dancing on the painted heavens. Elsewhere, an astrologer reclines on a cushion, tracing charts with a feather dipped in indigo. He talks of omens, eclipses, and dreams. You ask how time plays into all this. He shrugs, then whispers, time is the blanket the gods pull over the world when they want to speak. Poetic, and just vague enough to sound wise. He pulls out a clay tablet inscribed with rows of symbols. It looks like gibberish, until you notice the columns: date, star, interpretation. The Babylonians didn't just track what happened, they tracked when it happened in the sky. One line reads, when the moon is cut by the horns of the ram, a king will lose his gold. You'd call it astrology. They called it record-keeping. Outside, dusk deepens. The torches on the ziggurat now blaze like stars themselves. You stand at the temple's edge and look up. The constellations will into place, slowly, predictably, as they've done for millennia. And in that quiet, velvet dark, you feel what they must have felt, a sense that time is not just something that passes, it's something that glows, that sings, that wraps around you like warm linen. You exhale, and the wind answers. You descend from the temple terraces just as the last streaks of twilight give way to a soft, velvet night. Babylon glows beneath a silver moon, its rooftops shimmering with scattered torchlight, its courtyards buzzing with the gentle chatter of people winding down their day. But there's one last place you're drawn to tonight, a quiet corner of the city known for its dream interpreters. Not fortune-tellers in the theatrical sense, but solemn figures in layered robes who sit cross-legged beneath fig trees and ask careful questions. They do not wear timepieces. But their work, you're told, is all about timing. You approach one of them, a woman with silver-threaded hair and palms stained with ash. She studies you for a long moment, then gestures for you to sit. Tell me, she says, when did the dream occur? You frown, not sure how to answer. She nods slowly. Was it before dawn? That is the gods whispering. Was it at midday? Then it is heat madness. Was it just as you drifted into sleep? That one belongs to you. Her assistant records the answers on a wax tablet, along with the moon's current phase and the position of Jupiter. Every dream is timed, anchored in the stars. Even sleep has a schedule in Babylon. You listen as another man speaks of a dream where fish climbed trees. The interpreter leans forward and murmurs, second quarter moon. Venus in descent. You will receive an impossible invitation. He leaves, bewildered but grateful. Here's your quirky fact, ancient Babylonian dream texts often included timestamps, seen during the third night watch or between the second crow of the rooster and the first temple bell. Scholars still argue whether these were practical references or attempts to infuse dreams with cosmic credibility. But the consistency suggests the Babylonians believed dreams were time-sensitive messages, with expiration dates and divine delivery slots. You wander on, stopping at a quiet courtyard where scrolls are being copied by lamplight. One text catches your eye, a list of favorable hours for specific tasks. Want to harvest olives? Do it when the moon sits low and the stars of the bull are faint. Want to avoid an argument with your neighbor? Do not speak during the 5th hour of sunslant. Want to conceive a child with strong arms? Midnight, under Capricorn, after a fish dream. It's like a cosmic calendar mixed with advice from your most mystical aunt. A priest sitting nearby points at your sandals and asks if you've noticed how dreams linger longer when you wake facing east. You shake your head. He grins. Then tomorrow, sleep with your head toward the sunrise. The gods have better reception that way. You chuckle, but part of you wonders if he's right. Outside the scroll room, a gathering forms in a circular pavilion. It's not a ritual or trial, it's a nightly storytelling. A woman with a booming voice and a golden sash begins spinning a tale of two brothers who raced the sun, each marking time by a different star, and how one aged faster than the other. Time, again, is not just measured. It's felt, lived, folded into stories. The audience leans in, lulled by the rhythm of her words. You find yourself rocking slightly to her cadence, your heartbeat syncing with her pauses. A child beside you asks, "When will the story end?" The storyteller glances at the stars and replies, "When the third owl cries." You wait. One hoot. Two. Then three. She finishes the story mid-sentence. Everyone claps. That's the rule. As you head home, you look up at the stars once more. You recognize a few now. That curved shape above the rooftops. You think that's the Scorpion. And that slow-moving spark trailing across the sky, Mars, maybe, or as they called it, Nergal's Eye. You smile. You're starting to think in celestial time. You return to your mat, your limbs heavy, your mind full of constellations and rhythms and reeds dripping water. The city pulses softly in the distance. Tonight, you will dream. And maybe, just maybe, you'll wake at the exact moment Venus kisses the eastern horizon. The moment the gods whisper. The next morning arrives quietly, without fanfare or drums. You awaken not to sound, but to light, an oblique sunbeam crawling across the floor, nudging your eyelids open like a gentle finger. Babylon doesn't rush toward the day, it uncoils into it, like a scroll being slowly unfurled. You make your way through the still-waking city, curious now about something you've only heard in passing, the so-called missing hour. A group of young priests is gathering near the temple archives, unfurling a star chart so large it needs 3 people to hold it flat. One of them, barely old enough to grow a beard, taps the parchment with a reed stylus and frowns. "It doesn't line up," he mutters. "What doesn't?" you ask, stepping closer. "The moonrise. It's off. Again." He explains, rather impatiently, that once every few cycles, an hour appears to vanish, recorded eclipses arrive early, a star flicks on later than expected, dreams grow fainter. "It's a known problem," he says, trying to sound confident. The gods skip. But you can hear the uncertainty in his voice. Historians still argue whether Babylonian timekeepers genuinely believed in missing hours, or if this was their poetic way of describing astronomical irregularities they couldn't explain. Some modern researchers suggest it could have been leap-hour accounting, an attempt to fix the lunar calendar's natural drift. Others think it was an observational error. Or perhaps, simply a spiritual metaphor, moments when time paused, or slipped through the cracks. You follow the conversation as it shifts into debate. One priest insists the missing hour is divine punishment. Another calls it a sacred blink. A third just shrugs and jokes, maybe someone dropped it in the river. That gets a good laugh. And here's a fringe theory that's too delicious not to mention. A few rogue scholars suggest that Babylonian priests once staged the missing hour on purpose, using sleight of hand with water clocks and temple shadows to create a sense of awe, or compliance. Imagine that, ancient time magicians, making an hour disappear like street illusionists with a bowl of dripping clay. You visit the temple rooftop one more time to observe the instruments used to track these anomalies. The water clocks up here are finer than the ones you've seen before, some with lines etched so tightly they seem like eyelashes carved into stone. A priest adjusts the hole of a clepsydra with a piece of wet clay, murmuring, "Make it slow. We must delay the 6th mark today." You raise an eyebrow. He offers no further explanation. The sundials, too, have adjustments, movable gnomons that shift slightly for seasonal drift. One elder shakes his head as he recalibrates. "Time wants to change," he says. "We just try to catch it." You spend the afternoon watching time being massaged into place. Shadows measured, bowls refilled, bells rung a breath later than usual. Not corrected, just negotiated. Babylonian time, it turns out, is flexible. It doesn't march. It negotiates. It sighs. In a nearby garden, a philosopher priest delivers a quiet lecture to two young girls. Time is a circle, he says. Except when it's a river. Or a horse. Or sometimes, a knife. You don't understand all of it, but you appreciate the effort. You find yourself reflecting on modern time, those tiny numbers glowing on your devices, so exact, so rigid. Here, you've lived by the curve of light on stone, the wobble of a planet, the breath of a rooster. And yet, you've never felt more aware of each moment. Even now, as you sit by the Euphrates and watch the light ripple across the water, you feel it. The hour. Slipping by. Not lost, just stretching its arms. And maybe that's the truth of the missing hour. Maybe it's not gone. Maybe it's just hiding. Waiting for you to notice it. To honor it. To sit quietly enough that it returns. You breathe in. Deep. Still. And somewhere behind you, a temple bell rings. Exactly when it should. The sun dips low now, and Babylon is bathed in honeyed light, the kind that softens bricks and turns even the dust into gold. It's your last evening in this ancient city, and for the first time, you don't feel like a visitor watching from the outside. You feel timed. Tuned. As if your body now beats in rhythm with this place, as if your shadow has found its groove among the others. You wander through the workers' quarter, where clay ovens still burn and dinner smells waft from behind reed doors. People don't glance at clocks to know it's time to eat. The sky is enough. The cool air is enough. The slow uncoiling of muscle after a long day, that's enough. Along the canal, a group of men hauls baskets of reeds from a boat, their movements paced by song. Not to entertain, but to regulate, each verse timed to a lift, a turn, a drop. This is labor shaped by tempo. Ancient choreography. No manager barking from the shore. Just rhythm, repetition, and the slipping of time from hand to hand. Nearby, a group of children plays a game with pebbles and a ring of sticks. One of them shouts, "Shadow on the circle." Your turn ends, and laughs as another scurries away in mock defeat. They're not just playing, they're learning time. Without realizing it. Without needing to name it. You pass a woman sweeping her doorstep. She doesn't glance at the sky. She doesn't count the strokes. She simply stops when the breeze changes direction. Time in Babylon is intuitive. Sensory. It's not measured, it's felt in the soles of your feet, in the cooling of your tea, in the hush that falls just before the first bat flutters past. You arrive once more at the reed-lined edge of the Euphrates. The water moves gently, whispering over stones as it has done for thousands of years. Across the river, a faint drumbeat begins, slow, steady, spaced like deep breaths. You close your eyes and let it guide you. One beat. Then another. Each one a step farther into evening. A flute joins in. No melody, just soft, searching notes, like smoke curling upward. A final offering of sound before silence. You lie back on the stone embankment, watching as the stars prick open the sky. You recognize them now, Nergal's eye, the bull, the fish. They're not strangers anymore. They're companions. You know when they rise. You know what they mean. The priest on the opposite shore lifts a hand, and the drum slows. The last beat falls like a feather. And then, stillness. That reed flute. It lingers, a single note drifting on the wind. And for a brief moment, you don't know what century you're in. Because it doesn't matter. Babylon gave you more than a history of clocks. It gave you the feeling that time doesn't have to rule you. It can accompany you. Like a friend. Like a breeze. Like a heartbeat. And now, as we settle into stillness, I want you to feel the weight of that sky above you, wide, ancient, and filled with slow-burning stars. Let your breath fall into a quieter rhythm. Let your shoulders drop, your jaw loosen. There's nothing you need to do now. No hours left to chase. Just imagine that faint ripple of water beside you, the lazy current of the Euphrates weaving its endless path. Imagine the reeds swaying gently in the nighttime air. Hear that final tone of the flute still echoing, distant, warm, unhurried. Let your mind wander back through everything you've seen. The temple bells, the water clocks, the gnomons and shadows, the starlit maps drawn in clay. Time, everywhere. And yet, no pressure. No demands. Just guidance. Just flow. You're part of that now. Let your thoughts dissolve like a shadow at dusk. Let your breath rise and fall like torchlight in a calm corridor. If dreams arrive, let them come soft, like owl feathers. Let the stars do the counting tonight. There's no wrong way to sleep. No wrong way to be still. No missing hour here. Just rest. Just rest. Just rest.